Good evening. The opinions and statements voiced by our guests do not necessarily reflect the opinions of this network. Enjoy the shows.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army. Army officers say the missile, found sometime last week, has been inspected at Roswell, New Mexico, and sent to Wright Field, Ohio, for further inspection.
Now, historic films made in the spring of 1948 and just released show Eniwetok preparing for heavily guarded and still largely secret tests of new atomic weapons. The test's purpose is to measure atomic effects on thousands of different materials, 30,000 tons of them, not, as at Bikini, to prove military effectiveness.
San Francisco police say that 9 persons have been arrested in a narcotics raid on the headquarters of the Grateful Dead, a widely popular singing group. 2 members of the group, Rod McKernan and Robert Weir, and their business manager, Danny Rifkin, have been booked on suspicion of possessing narcotics.
3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11. Tower cleared.
We got a roll program. Neil Armstrong reporting the roll and pitch program, which puts Apollo 11 on a proper heading.
I'm going to step off the limb now. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Well, strange lights are causing a viral buzz on YouTube. Could we have caught extraterrestrial activity on a recent newscast? Brandon Arroyo investigates.
As the newscast ended, the controversy began back on September 26th. What is that light shining in the back of the dark night sky?
With coverage reaching all the way back to 1948, for over 70 years, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Now, Fate Magazine Radio is carrying on that tradition of setting the standard in paranormal talk radio as we report and discuss some of the most mysterious and perplexing phenomena imaginable in this strange world of ours. Now, here is your host of Fate Magazine Radio, Kat Hobson.
Good evening. The opinions and statements voiced by our guests do not necessarily reflect the opinions of this network. Enjoy the shows.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army. Army officers say the missile, found sometime last week, has been inspected at Roswell, New Mexico, and sent to Wright Field, Ohio, for further inspection.
Now, historic films made in the spring of 1948 and just released show Eniwetok preparing for heavily guarded and still largely secret tests of new atomic weapons. The test's purpose is to measure atomic effects on thousands of different materials, 30,000 tons of them, not, as at Bikini, to prove military effectiveness.
San Francisco police say that 9 persons have been arrested in a narcotics raid on the headquarters of the Grateful Dead, a widely popular singing group. 2 members of the group, Rod McKernan and Robert Weir, and their business manager, Danny Rifkin, have been booked on suspicion of possessing narcotics.
3, 2, 1, 0. all engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11. Tower cleared.
Here we got a roll program. Neil Armstrong reporting the roll and pitch program, which puts Apollo 11 on a proper heading.
I'm going to step off the limb now. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Well, strange lights are causing a viral buzz on YouTube. Could we have caught extraterrestrial activity on a recent newscast? Brandon Arroyo investigates.
As the newscast ended, the controversy began back on September 26th. What is that light shining in the back of the dark night sky?
With coverage reaching all the way back to 1948, for over 70 years, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Now, Fate Magazine Radio is carrying on that tradition of setting the standard in paranormal talk radio as we report and discuss some of the most mysterious and perplexing phenomena imaginable in this strange world of ours. Now, here is your host of Fate Magazine Radio, Kat Hobson.
Hello there. I am so glad that you are listening tonight because, I have been holding on to this interview and I'm really not sure why. It is with Nick Pope. Y'all will know him from Ancient Aliens. He appeared at this year's Ozark UFO conference. He was there last year too. He is so vastly knowledgeable on the subject of UAP UFOs. He is a former British Ministry of Defense employee. He is retired. He is featured on just about every ufology program that you may happen to come across. He's a leading figure in this field. I have been fortunate enough to hear him speak several times and to be able to have conversations with him as well. In this one, I'm just going to let you know, both of us have 4 rescues at this time. This was before I lost Heidi. And the only dogs you will hear here are mine. But he and Catherine are very, very much animal lovers. I hope that I get to meet her when we are in California for Contact in the Desert. But I have to tell you, I enjoy speaking with him. And this conversation gets a little deep. It's going to run a little bit over an hour. We're not going to put the first break in. The second one is in there. And trust me, Spreaker will take care of that. But at any rate, I hope you enjoy this. If you have any questions following it, just let me know. And I will follow up with him. Now, I do have to do a little housekeeping here. Because my best friend, a fan of the show, a very interested learner, is, I'm sure, listening. And she just celebrated her birthday yesterday. Ask me if her gift got to her. Nope. So, I just have to give her a shout out and say, Lori Dorsey, I am so glad you're my travel buddy, my ride or die, my chaos coordinator, and thank you for your friendship. You're an amazing human. And I also have to congratulate Cash McCollum. Yep, that's right. That's Rick's little brother, who was inducted into the MMA Hall of Fame last night. I have to tell you, those guys are some pretty tough cookies. So, and to his family, I know y'all are so proud of him. That's a tough gig to get, right? And to have been a title holder in it, even better. So, here we go. I hope that you enjoy Nick Pope even a little bit as much as I did. He's brilliant. Enjoy the show.
And when this happens, I mean, I'm not, I get criticized a lot for this. And we're getting into a difficult area here because there are some people in the UFO community who have criticized me for what they perceive as ramping up the threat narrative. And some people think that I'm still secretly working for the government, along with a number of other people who talk about this in the mainstream media. But that's not the case. I'm simply explaining that all the time in government, with anything, whatever the topic, government looks at a subject and asks itself, what are the opportunities and what are the threats?
Yes.
And with the best will in the world. I mean, it's something that comes so close to our aircraft carriers, our fighter jets. You have to say, well, is it China? Yeah. Is it China? Is it Russia? Is it something else? Congress wants to find out. I think the Pentagon now, to be fair, they want to find out. And I certainly want to know.
Well, that's understandable. Your primary role with the Ministry of Defense was to provide defense against unknown. And that's what you were working with.
Yes, and we don't take a conclusion-led view of this. We don't look at these sightings and say, that's extraterrestrial, or that's China or Russia. We say, let's look at the data and see what those data tell us. And I think the problem so far, I mean, it's the old saying, the greatest trick the devil ever played was convincing the world he doesn't exist. And I think for far too long, closed-minded bureaucrats have been looking the other way. They've been asleep at the wheel, saying to themselves, it can't be, so it isn't. And it's only recently that I think people have woken up to the fact that, wait a minute, this isn't just some fringe sci-fi conspiracy theory. This is our pilots, our radar operators, our intelligence officers, our senior leadership figures now talking about this quite openly.
Well, and boldly. You cannot look at those videos, and I am thankful that those were released, to be honest, because it took away hiding places. And it forced the narrative into the public mindset, purview. And as a result of that, now we are having discussions. We are actually having true investigations. We have systems being set into place, although I think to a large degree they're reinventing the wheel. But you have to follow the steps. And we are going to take a quick break right now, and we will be right back. So, we're back. When you first saw the TikTok videos, and did you have access prior to other people for that?
I did not. I had heard that something like this existed, and indeed there was a leak of one of the three videos some years before the New York Times actually got hold of it, actually on a UFO website and ultimately on a server somewhere in Germany. But that's a rather long and convoluted story. I had not been briefed on ATIP, though I knew that something like ATIP would have existed.
Right.
And I had not, as far as I can recollect, seen those specific videos. So I think my first reaction was twofold. Firstly, I was not surprised because, of course, I had always known that pilots, military pilots included, see these things, and yes, occasionally they are filmed. What did surprise me, or what frankly encouraged me, was the fact that now this story was being run by the New York Times,
yes,
quickly followed by the Washington Post, by Politico, by all the major TV networks, not just in the US, but all around the world, BBC as well in the UK, of course, many, many more. And so it was really a validation of what I knew had been going on, frankly, for decades. Mm-hmm. So it did slightly surprise me the way that it came out. And of course, it was a very, very strange, winding road involving a colorful cast of characters, including Lou Elizondo, Chris Mellon, Tom DeLonge, Leslie Kane, Ralph Blumenthal, Helene Cooper, Robert Bigelow, George Knapp, and a number of others. I mean, it really is
brilliant
quite extraordinary
in their own right. Yes.
So, how we got there is important, but the most important thing is that we got there.
Absolutely. And, I was very fortunate to be at UFO Congress. I got to meet several people that were involved with breaking the story, bringing it to the fore. Kevin Day, who was the radar operator for that carrier group. And there were so many different dynamics that came into play with this experience. It was really surprising to me. I had no idea. I've had friends that were in the Navy. I have, we have peers that have worked or had spouses work and retire who have experiences. And it just blew me out of the water because these jet fighter pilots, and I grew up on the Gulf Coast where they train in large extent. There are a lot of people who were probably surprised by the yeehaw moment when they had it, when their targeting camera locked. And I was actually a bit concerned when I first saw that because I felt that could have gone either way, right? So I was glad it was a positive, but they were so enthralled. It was a challenge, and fighter pilots accept every challenge that they feel they can win. And it was also just such an anomaly, such an unknown for them. And they had the opportunity to put their skills against this, only to have it just kind of shake them off and zip on. But it was so neat.
Absolutely. And it's when these, that's why the soundtrack that you hear on 2 of the 3 videos is so important, because these top guns, these elite men and women in the US Navy do not impress easily. And so when you listen to that soundtrack and when they're shouting to each other over the comm system, look at that thing. Whoa. You think, as I say, these people do not impress easily.
Exactly.
So something is impressing them. And you mentioned Kevin Day, of course, one of the radar operators, one of the heroes of all this, but the pilots too. So David Fravor, Ryan Graves, Alex Dietrich. I mean, as I say, these men and women are the tip of the spear, the best of the best. And when they get excited, we should get excited too.
I did. I really did. I love these things. I have such a love for this topic, and I came late to it, but I've always seen things in the sky. It never crossed my mind that there weren't really UFOs or people from other places. But to actually see something of this nature and to find out that, while it wasn't a lot of money that had been thrown into ATIP, Senator Reid had gone and gotten things grooving. He had a firm belief. He had a path. And he was a visionary in getting ATIP going. Of course, Lou, with his skill sets, everybody was working so diligently in a top secret environment, really, to get this information started, to find a way to gather and process this information. What was your... You said that you knew that there was a program like ATIP. Are those programs in every government bureaucracy?
Pretty much so, yes. In 1993, I helped set up a study. Really, what we'd been doing in the Ministry of Defense was investigating UFOs on a case-by-case basis. And I sat down with my opposite number in the Defense Intelligence staff, and we said, what we really need to do is a full intelligence assessment of the phenomenon in its entirety to see what we're dealing with. So we set it up. It was delayed many years because of political kind of machinations and funding issues. So I had been promoted and moved on to another Ministry of Defense post before the work actually started. So I didn't actually do the study or write the final report. But into the final report, which was dated, I think it was about 2000 by the time it was actually published, and it run to, or rather published internally. It was 2006 when it was partially declassified under the Freedom of Information Act. But there was a phrase in there where it said, very, very important phrase, and it said, I haven't got it in front of me, but something like, we have intelligence indicating that Russia and China have programs looking at this, and that there is a small informal study within the US intelligence community, and it's unknown as to whether this is indicative of a larger US program. So absolutely, we in the UK knew that Russia, China, indeed the United States were running programs on this, but we didn't know the details. We certainly didn't know the details of adversaries, but we didn't even know what allies were up to, which is interesting because people play this fairly kind of tightly, shall we say. Well, they don't share information.
Right. And yeah, just look at all the time that has been lost by that. With it being a global phenomenon, and of course perhaps people didn't realize just how globally effective this was, but with it being a global phenomenon, working together, coming together would have been perhaps something to unify our global community around.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I'm reminded of the classic Ronald Reagan quote when he was addressing the UN Security Council, and he said, and I'm paraphrasing, but I occasionally think how quickly we would set our differences aside if we faced a threat from beyond this earth.
Yes. The man was a visionary.
And people have talked, of course, about, and this is a debate that's still going on. I know people like Lou Elizondo are out there talking to a number of different governments and you know, both the official level and at the non-governmental level too, trying to stitch together a much more collaborative international effort. And it may be that this involves the United Nations at some point, though I think I have some experience of this. And then when I last discussed this with somebody at the UN, albeit this was about 12 years ago, but they were not particularly keen to take this. But we'll see. There's a lot in play right now. I don't have to tell you.
That is very true. Our world is a very interesting place at any time. More so right now, I think. But did they just feel that this was not something, the UN, that they felt was their purview, that they felt that, you know, the military side of global protection perhaps needed to be more involved than they did?
Well, it actually came up in the margins of two Royal Society discussion meetings in 2010 that I attended in the UK. And it was the second one, which I believe was in October, where the Professor Mazlan Othman, who ran the UN's Office of Outer Space Affairs, and there had been a number of sessions in the meeting about the debate. Obviously, we've got radio astronomers listening for signals, people like the SETI Institute, but there are other people doing what they call METI, which is active SETI. It stands for Messaging to Extraterrestrial Civilization. So the idea that we are proactively broadcasting, not just the accidental leakage of our radio and TV shows, but deliberately targeting messages at particular star systems. And that's been going on for a while, and it's very controversial. And so some people were saying, should this stop, or should it at least be regulated? And the whole question came to Mazlan Othman, and she I think was very reluctant to get involved, and said, look, come to the UN with a degree of consensus on this issue, and then maybe we can have a conversation, but don't come to us with a lot of different theories and ideas about how this should happen. And so it was not directly on the UFO issue, but it was clearly on the issue of things we do that might put us on the radar of extraterrestrial civilizations. So if they didn't want to grip that, I'm a little skeptical they'll want to grip the UFO issue, but we will see. I mean, 12 years is a long time. The personalities have changed. I think she's moved on. I'm not sure who's currently in post or what their view is, or indeed what the view of the current Secretary General of the United Nations is.
Well, they have quite a bit on their plate right now.
For sure.
That is one tough gig. But, I really do find it interesting because I have been a participant with SETI since I got my first computer. And I learned about it from my brother-in-law, who said, you're helping the world. Just let it run. And I thought, well, okay. So then I had a chance to speak with Seth in Pasadena, who is such a skeptic. And I just enjoy that. But, but he's very intelligent. The work that is being done, I find it very difficult to believe that there has not been any communication, but I'm not going to be one to argue. I think that we have so many different possibilities, and just the fact that SETI exists and still does is indicative to me of the belief and the faith that humanity has that there is something out there besides us. And we've been constantly searching for that. We have had other kind of, like the WOW signal, which I have heard is trying to be debunked at this point. What is your take on these things?
Well, I think you're right. Humans have always sought for some greater, higher meaning or purpose. We've always looked beyond this world and our immediate human experience for answers, whether we've done that through religion or whether we've done that through science. And I think what we're now seeing is that for the first time, humanity has in its hands, or is about to get into its hands, the tools, certainly the scientific tools, that might give us definitive proof of this. I mean, the SETI Institute has been listening for years, and they've had some interesting data, I'm sure. You mentioned the WOW signal, but I think it's going to be the next generation of radio telescopes, and particularly the square kilometer array that might definitively give us answers. That's something, the analogy that's been used is that it would be able to detect something with the output of the average airport radar system out to a distance of 50 light years. So we've got the square kilometer array. And now, of course, literally in the last few weeks, we've got the James Webb Space Telescope. And although that's predominantly going to be looking in the infrared spectrum, it raises the exciting possibility that if out there, certainly in our little corner of the Milky Way galaxy, there are any of these so-called alien megastructures, like Dyson spheres, for example, but maybe other things too, then James Webb might be able to find them.
I'm so excited by the possibilities of this telescope.
Yeah.
It's going to be so eye-opening.
When you think that this was really a once-in-a-generation mission. I mean, on a par with, say, the moon landing or Sputnik or the Viking landers on Mars or Hubble. I mean, this is one of these flagship missions on which the hopes and aspirations of an entire generation rest. And so much was riding on that launch and all the technical things that needed to go right, and they're not quite there yet, but all the signs look good. And my goodness, what a testament to the brilliance of the scientists and the engineers and everyone else who's been involved in this.
You know, I'm always so impressed by them. You know, these are people. My stepfather was involved with NASA. He was working crew in mission control when we lost the initial rocket and the 3 astronauts. And I've always been exposed and educated relevant to the various missions. I had childhood friends who didn't know why I wasn't constantly into Star Trek. I wanted to do reality instead of just the shows, and then I realized that the shows kind of were the reality. There's a lot of stuff being developed that was showing up in Star Trek through the years. And we have them now looking just exactly as they did and performing some of the functions that they did in the shows. Yeah.
Sure, we have the tricorders, we have the communicators.
Yes, yes,
you know,
the medical tools.
Absolutely. Next stop, hopefully, warp drive and teleportation.
Well, I tell you what, I was so amazed when I listened to some of the various physicists discussing teleportation in Pasadena that that there have been advancements with that. And I was just stunned. But single cell organism, yes, simple cell organism, it's just really amazing. We have some vastly intelligent people working on some extraordinarily complex things with great success.
Yes, and a lot of people don't realize that shortly after the New York Times wrote that they broke the story about ATIP and the U.S. Navy videos, obviously a lot of people in Congress turned around to the Defense Intelligence Agency and the Department of Defense and said, hey, you told us we didn't have a program. And now I read in the Times that we do. What's going on? So on January 9th, 2018, the DIA wrote to Congress and they said, you know, you've been asking about ATIP. Here's what it did. And attached to that letter was a list of 38 studies that had been done under the ATIP program. And in that list of studies were a range of subjects, including anti-gravity, invisibility, drive, wormholes, stargates, and the Drake equation. And the Drake equation, of course, you know, for all the people saying, well, couldn't this just have been about next-gen aerospace and weapon threats to the US? Well, if that's the case, why were they studying the Drake equation, the only purpose of which is to calculate how many communicable civilizations there might be in our galaxy? So that kind of let the cat out of the bag, so to speak.
I would think, right? And people are always so shocked that this is going on. So I think that is one of the biggest things that people don't talk about. Don't you?
Yes, and it's like there's a mental block on it, and people still can't believe, just going back to that letter, that there's a letter from the DIA to Congress mentioning the fact that they were studying stargates and warp drive. People think it's science fiction, but as you said with your perceptive remarks about Star Trek, it's not. Yesterday's science fiction is today's and tomorrow's certainly science fact.
Well, I just absolutely get so frustrated when people just blow off wormholes. Einstein was like, the speed of light is it, but you can bend it. You can bend time. Just run a stitch through there. The first time that I heard that concept, I thought, well, that would certainly alleviate, point A to point Z. So while the speed of light is the fastest to date, it still is something to ponder.
I
love pondering.
And these ideas of wormholes and warp drives, they're not necessarily contrary to Einstein's equations. They're not violations of the laws of physics. They're workarounds. And it's one of my pet hates is when people, usually not physicists, say, oh, this is impossible due to the laws of physics. You can't go faster than the light. We could never visit the stars, and nobody from the stars could ever visit us because it's contrary to the laws of physics. What they really mean is the laws of physics as they are currently understood. Yes. And history shows us, of course, that our understanding of the laws of physics is constantly evolving and changing.
Absolutely, and I love that.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experienced Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
And so we are back, and we have been discussing the ways to have little workarounds relevant to time travel, space travel, just the whole idea behind all of these wonderful things. And I think that the ideas stemming from Einstein. Einstein was not a linear thinker. And had he been, then we would not have such comments as he made relevant to the various workarounds. You know, he was open to that. He wasn't just locked in to being right all the time. Excuse me, I'm going to wait for this. So the fact that he was not purely linear, he had a sense of humor, he had a sense of wonder, he had very fixed ideas, he had an unusual outlook on life. And then, you know, we come into like the von Braun era here in the States with rocket propulsion and things of this nature. He was involved in the area where I grew up here in Alabama with rocket science, with NASA, with all of the other things. And I had such a hard time as a child being able to get my head around the politics of that. But when you come to space and rocket science and knowledge and trying to get someplace that no one has ever gone before, that exceeds politics.
Yeah, it's a classic case of swords into plowshares, and
Yes.
and the idea that, well, it's not an idea, it's true.
Yes.
That the Apollo space program had its roots in the V2 rocket, and some of the Nazi scientists, or scientists who joined the Nazi party, whether they believed the ideology or just felt they had to go along with it,
but that's where they lived.
Debatable.
That's what they had to survive.
Yes,
And
but,
that was their home.
Yeah,
So,
and it's one of those ironies, I suppose, that out of evil sometimes comes good.
I think that is an irony, but I think that it is such a positive, because if you cannot stay in negativity indefinitely. And good, in my experience, does triumph quite often.
Well, the idea that these missiles, which were designed to rain down death and destruction, evolved into the technology that hopefully one day will take humankind to the stars.
Yes.
It is, I think, one of those bizarre twists in the human story.
I think so too. And it definitely gives one pause, because, as I said, I think good triumphs often, and I'm very glad of that. And I think that we are very protected from our own nature by all type of innovative things, whether by divine guidance or simply the fact that we haven't figured out how to blow ourselves to smithereens yet. I'm not sure which.
No, well, fingers crossed on that one.
Yes. Yes.
I think right now it seems there are one or two people who have their finger dangerously close to the button, but
you know, Nick, I think that's been that way for generations. There's always going to be someone who is a sticky wicket, and there's always going to be those who find ways to avoid that. I hope that continues.
Absolutely.
So, and, you know, do you feel that we are, if we're being visited and they've been around our nuclear armaments, they've been around as Foo Fighters, I mean, there has always been, since we have become aviators ourselves, unknown aviators around us. Do you think that they're just waiting to see if we are going to push that button? Do you think they're here to eliminate the danger of that button? I just find it interesting that they're so focused, or were so focused, on our nuclear arms.
Yeah, there's an interesting problem with the whole nuclear question. And it was a problem that was briefly addressed in the ODNI preliminary intelligence assessment that I mentioned. And it's the problem of collection bias. It said, yes, there do seem to be this sort of clustering of sightings around various facilities. And I mentioned earlier the critical national infrastructure.
Yes.
But it said what we still aren't quite sure about is whether this is because they are genuinely more interested, whatever the true nature of the phenomenon, it's more interested in or attracted by nuclear facilities, or, and this is the problem, the potential confound, whether it is simply that those particular areas are more heavily surveilled. I mean, if you're looking a lot in a particular area, as you are, of course, with all the surveillance around nuclear facilities, you are more likely maybe to see things. So we still have to get to the bottom of that. What I think one danger is taking the sort of, and I've heard this sometimes from some, more spiritual, New Age minded people in the UFO community. But I think it's sometimes dangerous to have this view that you're just going to have this magical savior that comes from above and that it's going to stop us pressing the button. Because what that does is it almost excuses you from pressing the button. The idea that you've got a safety net. And I think it's a dangerous mindset. I think it's a much better mindset to have, if we press the button, that's it. So let's not press the button. Rather than, if we do, it's fine, aliens will save us. And I mean, that's a nice view, but I'm not sure it's going to happen.
Well, they haven't yet.
Yeah, the nearest analogy is the Star Trek analogy of the Prime Directive. And I occasionally think, I sometimes think to myself, if we're being visited, the most likely hypothesis, it seems to me, is that they're coming here as anthropologists to study the structure of an emerging civilization, i.e. us, and that they wouldn't, they're not here to blow us up, but neither are they here to stop us blowing ourselves up. They're here to observe and to truly advanced civilizations. And in a universe nearly 14 billion years old, there'll be civilizations out there perhaps with millions of years head start on us.
Yes.
We are not going to have anything to teach them about science and technology. So they might be interested in the more abstract things: art, literature, poetry, architecture, our religions, our political systems, those sorts of things. And of course, the biodiversity of life on Earth.
If we can just not screw that up.
Absolutely.
Fukushima scares me.
Yeah,
still.
Let's not blow ourselves up. Let's not drive species into extinction.
Absolutely. I really enjoy you sharing this because I believe in the Prime Directive. If there were something, I have enjoyed the opportunity to talk to so many people in this field. And one of them, Dr. Mike Masters, had written a book, The Identified Flying Objects. Are they us coming back? Have we, in the future, done something to damage our DNA? Or do we need, we're just coming back to try to see what caused this cataclysmic thing or that thing? And it's an interesting perspective, the anthropological studies. So I'm glad that you brought that up.
Sure. And it's interesting you mentioned time travel. I mean, of course, there's one of the things that the intelligence assessment of the phenomenon said is that there's probably not going to be a single neat answer to the UFO mystery. So these things aren't mutually exclusive. Just because you have extraterrestrials doesn't mean you can't have time travelers. Just because you have time travelers doesn't mean you can't have something intruding from other dimensions. Now, there are very few physicists, theoretical physicists, doing work on time travel, but one of the people who is Professor Ronald Mallet. And he did a fascinating paper, or multiple papers, but one of his ideas is that if you wanted to send a message through time, you would do it using neutrinos, because neutrinos can have a number of different states, but specifically they can have an up and a down state. And therefore, if you could manipulate that, what you could do is send a binary message back through time. And and here's the Rendlesham Forest tie-in, of course, because Jim Penniston's experience or one of Jim Penniston's experiences of Rendlesham Forest was this so-called binary message. And a lot of people just wrote that off as fantasy and imagination until somebody said, well, look, wait, Professor Ronald Mallet is doing some theoretical physics on this. And everyone took a look, and it's like, oh, wait a minute, suddenly this doesn't sound quite so crazy.
Well, it doesn't. And, we've actually had crop circles with binary messages in them.
Yes, and fractals as well. And of course, a lot of people believe that mathematics is going to be the universal language by which civilizations communicate. I mean, pi is going to be pi everywhere in the universe, so far as we know, because the laws of physics and mathematics and indeed chemistry seem to be constants in the observable universe.
The very few constants.
Yeah. There'll be a lot of diversity out there, but so far as we know, pi will always be pi. And that gives you a great start point. Prime numbers will always be prime numbers. And that, of course, we saw in the movie Contact, which a lot of people...
I was just thinking that.
Well, a lot of people forget that Contact was based on a book written by Carl Sagan.
Yes. And it is still today my favorite movie. One of the top three.
I think that and Arrival tell very interesting stories about what our human reaction might be. And of course, I write some sci-fi myself. I've written a couple of novels, but the best science fiction is ultimately usually about us, in a sense, or certainly what our human response to first contact would be. And I think Contact and Arrival do it in a beautifully thought-provoking way.
I think so too. I am so overcome sometimes when I sit there and I think of all the possibilities that exist when I sit out on my deck and I'm just looking at my sky. And I hope that it's going to be as wonderful for my grandchildren as it is for me. I think it's just such a blessing. I'm going to stop talking right now until they stop that. I'm so sorry.
No worries. Maybe they're excited by the possibilities too.
I think they are, because they sit outside with me all the time. Even when
And we don't really know. I mean, this is off topic, but we don't really know what animals are thinking. But obviously when the dog looks up at the sky and sees the moon rise, I mean, the dog sees the moon too, and the stars.
I have a dog that I adopt. All of my dogs are adopted rescues, but I have a little miniature golden retriever mix, and when I brought her home from the pound, she will get in the hammock with me and watch the sky. She will lay in a hammock with me, and I've never had a dog do that. And my husband thought that it was crazy, so he started paying attention, and he'll go outside to bring her in if I'm on the air or something, and she won't come in. She'll be sitting in a chair. She won't get in the hammock by herself, but she'll be sitting in a chair watching the sky. And we often have, of course, everyone, because the sky changes, we have Orion and the Pleiades, and that aspect of the sky here right now at 9 and 10 o'clock at night. And that is what she looks for.
Well, who knows what she's thinking? Who knows what she's thinking, but she's thinking something.
I wish I did, because it's just bizarre. And, you know, we go to the coast and she'll be sitting out on the beach with me watching that too. She's the only one who will. I've got 4 dogs. And she's the only one who has ever done that. She's a star dog. I
guess it just shows that as with people, with animals, of course we know that there are differences in temperament and in character and personality, and yeah, who knows what's out there, and I'm sure our destiny does lie out there among the stars, and I think it's going to be a wonderful journey.
It already is. I'm so sorry, Nick.
No worries.
I'm going to pop their little noses.
I think it's quite sweet and a reminder that we can have these theoretical conversations, but there are other people who demand our time and our attention too, and who are just as important.
They have been taking very good care of me for the week. But
maybe they just want to join the conversation. Maybe they know something or believe something that they want to contribute to.
I have had the best time with our conversation, and I am looking forward to seeing you.
Yeah, it's going to be a great conference. I think a lot of people, of course, have not had that in-person experience for a while. I have been doing some in-person events, but they're still a little few and far between. But I think we're getting there, and I know that there's going to be a lot of fascinating material. Forward to being there. I'm looking forward to reconnecting with some old friends and meeting some new ones too. And I think it's going to be great. And what a time for it. With everything going on right now with this subject, there couldn't be a more opportune time for people with a shared interest in this to come together, to exchange information and ideas, and just to socialize and to discuss this wonderful journey, which, as you say, we are already on.
Well, and I think it's going to be such a diverse and fascinating group of speakers that there's going to be a lot of knowledge and a lot of good experiences shared. I'm so looking forward to it.
Me too. So, I will see you there.
Absolutely. Thank you.